Supreme Commander Blazer stood at the crystalline viewport of the Galactic High Command Station, his forearms crossed behind his back, as he watched the holographic projection of the small blue planet. His iridescent scales shimmered under the pale light of distant stars, and a smirk played across his reptilian features. "Tell me again," he said, turning to face the assembled council members, "why we should waste resources on such a primitive world." The council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. 6 of the most powerful beings in the Drachnid Empire sat around the quantum steel table, their expressions ranging from bored to mildly amused. Admiral Krixia, her tentacles writhing with barely contained excitement, spoke first. "Supreme Commander, the humans have something we need. Their water is uniquely pure. Our scientists believe it contains trace elements crucial for our bioenhancement programs." She paused, her bioluminescent spots pulsing with each word. "But more importantly, they are laughably weak." General Norvac snorted, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on the hologram. "Weak? That's an understatement. Their strongest warriors would struggle against our younglings. And their children." He threw back his head, releasing a booming laugh that echoed through the chamber. "Their children spend their time staring at primitive electronic devices and playing with toys." The council erupted in laughter, their various appendages twitching with amusement. Supreme Commander Blazer raised one of his upper hands, silencing the room instantly. "Show me their defenses," he commanded. Captain Yizix, the youngest council member, manipulated the holographic controls with her crystalline fingers. The image of Earth transformed, highlighting military installations, weapon systems, and defense grids. "As you can see," Yizix said, her voice dripping with disdain, "their most advanced weapons are barely past the fusion stage. They have no planetary shields, no quantum arrays, not even basic neural networks for their combat systems. Their strongest defense." She zoomed in on a nuclear submarine. Projectile weapons powered by controlled atomic reactions. Primitive at best. Blazer's secondary eyes narrowed as he studied the display. "And their leadership?" Fractured Admiral Krixia replied, her tentacles curling with satisfaction. "Multiple nations, multiple leaders, endless squabbles over resources and territory. They will never unite in time to mount an effective resistance." The Supreme Commander paced around the table, his claws clicking against the polished floor. "Their numbers. Approximately 8 billion, General Norvac reported, but most are civilians. Their actual fighting force is less than 1% of that." And again. He chuckled. "Their young are completely useless in combat. They shelter them, coddle them, waste resources protecting them instead of training them as warriors." Blazer stopped pacing and spread all 4 arms wide. "Then it is decided. We will take this Earth, harvest their water, and add another primitive species to our collection. Prepare the invasion fleet." Supreme Commander Captain Yizix interjected, "Should we even bother with a full invasion force? A single battle group could." "No," Blazer cut her off, his scales darkening with anticipation. "We will do this properly. Send in the 13th Fleet. Let them experience the full might of the Drachnid Empire. Let them understand how truly insignificant they are." He turned back to the viewport, watching as the holographic Earth slowly rotated before him. "Perhaps we will even keep some as pets. Their children might amuse our own younglings." The council chamber filled with cruel laughter once again, none of them aware that their greatest humiliation would come at the hands of one of those very children they so casually dismissed. The 13th Fleet of the Drachnid Empire emerged from quantum space in perfect formation. 1,000 warships strong. Fleet Admiral Zenthor watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Stellar Devastator, as his vessels positioned themselves around the primitive planet's orbital paths. His segmented armor plates clicked softly as he adjusted his posture in the command throne. "Status report," he demanded, voice resonating through the bridge's neural amplifiers. Commander Rax's fingers danced across the biotech control interface. "All ships reporting optimal status, Admiral. The humans' primitive detection systems haven't even noticed our presence. Their satellites are easily avoided, and their radar technology might as well be stone tools compared to our stealth systems." "Excellent," Zenthor purred, his throat sacs expanding with pleasure. "Deploy the atmospheric infiltrators. Let's give them a proper introduction to their new masters." Across the fleet, launch bays opened like blooming flowers of death. Thousands of smaller craft poured forth, their quantum-shielded hulls reflecting the sunlight as they descended toward Earth's atmosphere. The invasion had begun. Sir Lieutenant Prax called out, her crystalline antennae twitching with amusement. Their global communication networks are buzzing with confusion. They're calling our ships, and I quote, weather anomalies and mass hallucinations. The bridge crew shared a moment of laughter at the humans' ignorance. Zenthor allowed himself a small smile before returning to his commanding demeanor. Patch me into the fleet-wide command channel, he ordered. Once the connection was confirmed, he began his address. Warriors of the Drachnid Empire, today we claim another world for our glorious civilization. Remember your training, but do not waste too much energy. These humans are beneath even our most basic combat protocols. The first wave of ships breached the atmosphere, their quantum shields easily dispersing the friction heat. Human aircraft rose to meet them, primitive jets armed with simple projectile weapons and short-range missiles. How quaint, Commander Raxa observed, watching through the fleet's shared visual feed. They're actually trying to fight back with their fossil fuel-powered vehicles. The human aircraft unleashed their weapons, a desperate barrage of missiles and bullets that splashed harmlessly against the Drachnid shields. In response, the alien ships didn't even bother with their main weapons. Instead, they simply activated their electromagnetic pulse generators, watching as the human aircraft lost power and plummeted from the sky. Their most advanced weapons, Lieutenant Prax noted, updating her combat log, can't even scratch our most basic defensive systems. This is almost disappointing. Zenthor leaned forward as the first landing ships touched down in major human cities. Show me their response. The main view screen filled with multiple feeds showing human military forces mobilizing. Tanks, troops, and artillery, all moving to engage the Drachnid forces. The alien warriors, each standing 3 meters tall in their powered combat suits, merely walked through the barrage of human weapons fire. Sir Commander Raxa reported, trying to contain her laughter. The humans are attempting to communicate. They're broadcasting messages of peace and requesting to negotiate. How predictable, Zenthor sighed, settling back in his command throne. Send them our standard response. Full planetary surrender, immediate cessation of all resistance, and complete submission to Drachnid authority. He watched as the human forces continued their futile attacks, their most powerful weapons barely registering on the Drachnid defense monitors. Their primitive nuclear missiles had been neutralized before they could even leave their silos. Their communications were being systematically shut down, and their leadership was in chaos. To think, Zenthor mused, addressing his bridge crew, Supreme Commander Blazer actually authorized a full fleet for this operation. We could have conquered this world with a single ship. As the invasion proceeded with mechanical precision, none of the Drachnid forces noticed a small figure watching from the shadows of a devastated city. A young human whose presence would soon challenge everything they believed about this primitive species. Ground Commander Thrax stood atop the ruins of what had once been a human military base, his armored boots crushing spent shell casings into the concrete. Around him, the pride of Earth's military forces lay in waste, their tanks reduced to smoking hulks, their aircraft scattered like broken toys. His neural implants transmitted a constant stream of victory reports from across the globe. Commander, his second-in-command, Lieutenant Cora, approached with a spring in her cybernetically enhanced stride. You need to see this. The humans attempted to coordinate a global counterattack. The results were amusing. She projected a holographic replay of the battle from her ocular implants. Thrax watched as human forces from multiple nations launched their most sophisticated assault yet. Stealth bombers, supersonic fighters, and even their primitive attempt at orbital weapons, all coordinated in what they must have thought was an impressive display of military might. Play the response, Thrax commanded, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. The hologram showed the Drachnid response. A single command signal had activated their planetary defense grid. Thousands of microscopic quantum drones, deployed during the initial invasion, simply shut down every piece of human technology in their path. The mighty human armada had fallen from the sky like stones, their weapons systems as useless as slingshots against a star. Their most advanced AI, Cora noted, consulting her battle logs, has the processing power of our children's teaching units. Their quantum computing efforts are barely theoretical. They still use silicon chips. She laughed, the sound echoing through her helmet's amplifiers. Thrax activated his command channel. Status report on civilian control measures. The responses flooded in through his neural link. Major population centers were already under Drachnid control. Resistance was minimal, largely consisting of primitive projectile weapons that couldn't penetrate even the lightest Drachnid armor. The humans' much vaunted special forces had tried guerrilla tactics, only to be easily tracked by thermal scanning and quantum sensors. "Send in the peacekeepers," Thrax ordered, watching as massive hovering platforms descended from the clouds. Each carried hundreds of enforcement drones, their sleek forms designed to inspire fear and submission in conquered species. "Let's show them how the Drachnid Empire maintains order." The drones spread out across the cities, their anti-gravity drives humming softly as they established patrol patterns. Any human who showed signs of resistance was immediately immobilized with targeted electromagnetic pulses. Those who surrendered were processed efficiently, tagged with quantum trackers, and assigned to their new roles in the Empire's resource extraction operations. "Sir," one of his subordinates, Captain Urix, called out, "we're detecting unusual behavior in Sector 7. A group of humans is celebrating." Thrax turned his attention to the indicated area. Through the surveillance feeds, he saw humans gathering in what appeared to be a training facility, carrying primitive bladed weapons and wearing light armor. They seemed to be preparing for combat, but their behavior was almost festive. "Magnify," he ordered, his secondary eyes focusing on the details. "Are those children?" Indeed, among the gathered humans were several young ones, including one particularly small female who appeared to be leading the others in combat drills. The sight was so absurd that Thrax actually laughed out loud. "Let them play their games," he declared, dismissing the feed with a wave of his hand. "It will make their eventual submission even more satisfying. Proceed with the resource extraction protocols." Across the planet, massive harvesting ships descended through the atmosphere, their enormous forms casting shadows over the conquered cities. These vessels would begin the process of collecting Earth's unique water supplies, draining their oceans and aquifers for the Empire's use. Commander Lieutenant Kora interrupted his thoughts. The human leaders wished to formally surrender. They're requesting a ceremony, following their primitive diplomatic protocols. Thrax considered this for a moment. Grant their request. It will provide an excellent opportunity to demonstrate our absolute dominance. Prepare the Grand Assembly Hall in their United Nations building. I want every human leader to witness their species' submission to the Empire. He turned to survey the battlefield one final time, noting with satisfaction how quickly and thoroughly they had crushed Earth's defenses. The humans had fought bravely, he had to admit, but bravery without technology was merely suicide with better publicity. "One more thing," he added, addressing his command staff. "Send observers to that training facility in Sector 7. I want to know what those humans are planning, not because they pose any threat." He clarified quickly, noting his officers' surprised expressions, but because their futile resistance might prove entertaining. As the sun set over the conquered planet, Thrax allowed himself a moment of pride. The invasion had gone even more smoothly than Supreme Commander Blazer had predicted. The humans were defeated, their military broken, their civilization in ruins. All that remained was to process them into the Empire's vast bureaucracy of servant species. Little did he know that in that seemingly insignificant training facility, a force was gathering that would shake the very foundations of the Drachnid Empire's belief in their own superiority. The small human female he had so casually dismissed was about to teach them all a lesson about underestimating Earth's children. Captain Urix adjusted his surveillance equipment, focusing on the small human female who had caught Commander Thrax's attention. His report was due soon, and he wanted to understand why these primitives continued their pointless combat training despite their obvious defeat. Through his quantum-enhanced vision, he observed the human child. Maya Rodriguez, according to their captured databases, aged 12 Earth cycles. She moved with unexpected precision through the training facility, her small frame belying a disturbing grace that made his secondary heart flutter with unease. "Drone 7, magnify and analyze," he commanded. The floating surveillance unit zoomed closer, providing biometric data. The girl's muscle density was unusual for her species, particularly for one so young. Her neural patterns showed activity levels that nearly matched Drachnid warrior cadets. "Fascinating," Lieutenant Kora commented, joining him at the observation post. According to her records, she has mastered multiple forms of their primitive combat arts. Karate, Kendo, something called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Her instructors noted she achieved in months what takes others years. Maya was leading a group of older humans through a series of synchronized movements with traditional Earth weapons. Her chosen blade, a curved sword she wielded with shocking familiarity, sliced through the air with mathematical precision. "Look at this," Cora continued, pulling up more data. Before our arrival, she had won 37 competitions against adults. Her combat instructor, before we processed him for labor duty, called her the once-in-a-century prodigy. Urix chittered dismissively. Prodigy or not, she's still just a human child. Our youngest cadets could. His words cut off as Maya suddenly stopped her practice routine, turned directly toward their hidden surveillance drone, and smiled. It wasn't the fearful or submissive expression they were accustomed to seeing on conquered species. This smile carried something else, something that made his exoskeletal plates tighten uncomfortably. "Should we disperse them?" one of his subordinates asked, weapons system already charging. No, Urix decided, remembering Commander Thrax's orders. Continue observation. Their persistence in these obsolete combat forms might provide valuable psychological data for the Empire's xenologists. Through the surveillance feed, they watched as Maya approached one of the training dummies they had scanned earlier. What they had dismissed as primitive practice equipment, they now realized had been carefully modified. The dummy's surface matched the exact density and resistance of Drachnid armor. How did they calculate that? Cora wondered aloud, her antennae twitching with concern. Our armor specifications are classified beyond even their highest security clearances. Maya's next movement series focused entirely on striking the dummy's weak points, points that perfectly aligned with Drachnid armor joint sections. Her blade found gaps that even some of their own warriors forgot existed. Impossible, Urix breathed, all four of his eyes widening. She would have had to observe our troops in combat, analyze our movement patterns, and extrapolate our biological vulnerabilities. No human child could. Again, Maya stopped mid-motion and looked directly at their position. This time, she bowed slightly, a gesture that their cultural databases identified as both respectful and challenging. Then she spoke, her young voice carrying clearly through their audio sensors. "When you're done watching, perhaps your warriors would like to train with us. We promise to be gentle." The entire observation team froze. Their stealth systems were supposed to be undetectable. Their position was secure. Yet somehow, this human child had not only known they were there, but had been aware of their surveillance from the beginning. Captain Cora said quietly, "I believe we should report this to Commander Thrax immediately." Urix nodded slowly, unable to shake the unsettling feeling that they had drastically miscalculated something about Earth's younger generation. As they prepared to withdraw, Maya returned to her training, but now her movements had changed. She was demonstrating to her students exactly how to disable a Drachnid warrior's primary nerve clusters through their armor's cooling vents. "Yes," Urix agreed, "Commander Thrax thinks to see this, and perhaps we should recommend increasing security in this sector." Maya's laughter followed them as they retreated, a sound that would haunt Urix's dreams for cycles to come. Commander Thrax stood in the central plaza of what humans called New York City, surrounded by his elite guard as he oversaw the processing of another group of conquered civilians. The afternoon's tedium was interrupted by Captain Urix's urgent transmission. Commander Urix's voice crackled through the neural link. "We have a situation at the training facility. The human child, she's..." A small figure walked boldly into the plaza, cutting through the crowd of cowering humans like a knife through water. Maya Rodriguez carried her curved blade openly, her training uniform spotless, despite the city's dust and debris. The Drachnid guards raised their weapons, but Thrax waved them down, curiosity overtaking caution. So he rumbled, his translator converting his words to Earth Standard English. "This is the little warrior my observers reported. Have you come to surrender your primitive weapon?" Maya stopped exactly 7 meters from his position, a distance that Thrax's combat systems identified as the optimal striking range for her blade length. The correlation sent an unexpected chill through his neural pathways. "Actually," Maya replied, her young voice carrying clearly across the plaza, "I've come to challenge you. Your empire prides itself on warrior traditions, right? I checked your public broadcasts." Laughter erupted from the assembled Drachnid warriors. Lieutenant Cora, who had accompanied Urix during the surveillance, stepped forward, her mandibles clicking with amusement. "Commander, allow me to handle this entertainment. Surely you needn't waste your time with a human hatchling." Maya's expression didn't change, but her grip on the sword shifted slightly. Your armor's cooling vent on the left shoulder is misaligned by 3 millimeters. It would take approximately 0.4 seconds to disable your primary motor functions through that gap. The laughter stopped. Cora unconsciously touched her left shoulder, where indeed a recent combat drill had left her armor slightly damaged. Thrax stepped forward, his massive form towering over Maya. You dare to threaten an officer of the Drachnid Empire? Perhaps we've been too lenient with Earth's young ones. A demonstration of our power might be necessary. Not a threat, Maya responded calmly. An observation. Like how your command neural implant requires 0.2 seconds to process visual data, creating a perfect window for traditional kendo striking techniques. The plaza fell silent. Even the processed humans stopped their work, sensing the tension in the air. Thrax's secondary eyes narrowed as his combat systems ran probability calculations. How could this child know such specific details about their technology? You amuse me, Small One, Thrax announced, though his tone carried less certainty than before. Very well. What form shall this challenge take? Maya held up a data crystal, another piece of stolen Drachnid technology that shouldn't have been in human hands. Your Empire's combat protocols. Article 7, Section 3. Any conquered species may challenge their overseers to ritual combat. Victory means freedom for their chosen territory. You expect us to accept a challenge from a child? One of the guards sneered. You're not even fully grown. Your protocols don't specify age requirements, Maya countered. They only mention worthy warriors unless you're afraid to fight someone a third your size. The implied insult hung in the air like plasma discharge. Thrax felt his warrior pride surge against his tactical judgment. This human child had managed to research their customs, analyze their weaknesses, and manipulate their honor code. It was both impressive and infuriating. Very well, Thrax declared, silencing the murmurs of protest from his officers. Tomorrow at dawn, the combat arena aboard my command ship. When you lose, you will serve as a personal example of what happens to those who defy the Empire. Maya bowed, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both respect and warning. And when I win, my city goes free. Deal. As she turned and walked away, her small form temporarily silhouetted against the setting sun, Thrax couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous had been set in motion. He had just committed to ritual combat with a human child, and yet, why did his combat systems keep flashing warning signals? The combat arena aboard the Stellar Devastator thrummed with ancient power. Quantum field generators maintained the traditional octagonal battle space, their purple energy barriers casting ethereal shadows across the assembled crowd of Drachnid warriors. Fleet Admiral Zenthor himself had come to witness this unprecedented event. This is highly irregular, Commander Thrax X Zenthor commented, watching as ceremonial guards prepared the arena according to traditions older than Earth's recorded history, accepting a challenge from a human child. Thrax adjusted his ceremonial combat armor, its surfaces gleaming with runes of power. She quoted our laws perfectly, Admiral. To refuse would shame the Empire. Besides, he added, mandibles twitching with anticipated victory, this will serve as an excellent lesson to the humans about their place in the universe. The arena's main doors parted, and Maya Rodriguez entered. She had traded her training uniform for a simple black combat suit, her curved sword held loosely at her side. The assembled Drachnid warriors fell silent, many seeing her in person for the first time. By the quantum void, Lieutenant Cora whispered, she's even smaller up close. Maya walked to the center of the arena, her steps measured and precise. She showed no sign of fear or awe at the ancient combat chamber, her eyes focused solely on Thrax. The commander felt an unfamiliar sensation in his primary heart, something that his neural implants took a concerning amount of time to identify as uncertainty. The ceremonial guard, resplendent in armor that hadn't changed in 10,000 cycles, stepped forward to recite the ancient combat protocols. This is a challenge under Article 7, Section 3 of the Imperial Combat Code. The human warrior Maya Rodriguez challenges Commander Thrax for the freedom of her territorial unit, designation New York City. Quantum scanners swept over both combatants, confirming their weapons and armor met regulations. Maya's sword, despite its primitive appearance, was approved for ceremonial combat. Thrax wielded the traditional weapon of his rank, a quantum-edged glaive that could cut through battleship armor. The combat will proceed until submission, incapacitation, or the guard paused, glancing at Maya's small form, fatality. Do both warriors accept these terms? Accepted, Thrax declared, his voice booming through the arena. Accepted, Maya replied, her young voice somehow carrying the same weight. The guard retreated, and the quantum barriers intensified. Warriors, prepare for combat. Thrax assumed the traditional opening stance of Drachnid martial combat, his massive form towering over Maya. His neural combat systems projected dozens of attack patterns, each calibrated to end the fight quickly and decisively. Maya's stance was unlike anything in the Drachnid combat databases. She held her sword in a position that seemed to leave her completely open to attack, yet Thrax's tactical systems were having trouble identifying a clear strike point. Begin. Thrax moved with the speed that had made him legendary among his people, his glaive describing a perfect arc of quantum energy toward Maya's position. But she wasn't there anymore. Somehow the human child had shifted exactly 3 centimeters to the right, causing the strike to miss by a margin so precise it had to be calculated. Impossible, Cora breathed from the sidelines. No human reflexes are that fast. Maya moved like water, each step placing her exactly where Thrax's attacks weren't. The commander's neural system struggled to predict her movements, which seemed to follow no logical pattern yet maintained perfect geometric precision. Stand still and fight properly, Thrax roared, his secondary arms deploying combat shields as he launched a combination attack that would have overwhelmed most Drachnid warriors. Maya spoke for the first time since the fight began. Like this, suddenly she was inside his guard, her blade moving in patterns that his combat systems recognized too late as perfectly calculated strikes against his armor's weak points. Warning signals flashed across Thrax's neural interface as sections of his armor lost power. Somehow, this human child had memorized the exact sequence needed to disable Drachnid combat systems. Each strike hit with surgical precision, using his own strength and momentum against him. The assembled warriors watched in stunned silence as their commander, one of the most decorated warriors in the Empire, was systematically taken apart by an opponent he outweighed by several hundred kilos. Maya moved through his defenses like they didn't exist, her blade finding gaps in his armor that shouldn't have been visible to human eyes. How Thrax demanded, desperation creeping into his voice as more of his systems failed. How do you know our weaknesses? Maya ducked under a powerful swing, her blade tracing a pattern that paralyzed his lower right arm. I watched. I learned, while your warriors were laughing at Earth's children, we were studying your every move. Your armor joints flex exactly 2 millimeters before you strike. Your neural systems have a 0.2-second lag when processing unexpected movement patterns, weaknesses. The fight ended not with a thunderous clash, but with a whisper of steel and a soft click. Maya's final strike slipped through a gap smaller than a human finger, pressing precisely against Thrax's neural shutdown point. The mighty commander froze, his systems locked in emergency shutdown. Submit, Maya said quietly, her blade steady against the vital point. In the silence that followed, 10,000 cycles of Drachnid martial tradition hung in the balance. Then, slowly, Commander Thrax spoke the words no one had expected to hear. I. Submit. The combat arena fell silent as Commander Thrax's submission echoed through the quantum barriers. Fleet Admiral Zenthor rose from his observation throne, all 4 of his eyes fixed on the impossible scene before him. A human child, barely tall enough to reach a Drachnid warrior's waist, had just defeated one of their finest commanders. This, Zenthor began, his voice carrying the weight of imperial authority, changes everything. Maya stepped back from Thrax, her blade lowering but never quite leaving a ready position. The commander's system slowly reactivated as she released the neural shutdown point. He rose unsteadily, his massive frame showing the precise damage of her calculated strikes. How many others? Thrax asked, his translator struggling to convey the complex emotions in his voice. How many more of Earth's children have been watching us, learning our weaknesses? Maya's smile carried a wisdom far beyond her 12 years. All of us. While you saw us playing games on our devices, we were analyzing your combat footage. When you thought we were wasting time with toys, we were building practice drones that mimicked your movement patterns. Every child in my class can identify 23 critical weaknesses in your standard combat armor. The assembled Drachnid warriors shifted uncomfortably, many instinctively checking their armor's integrity. The implications were staggering. They had dismissed an entire generation of humans as irrelevant, only to discover they had been under constant, careful study. Supreme Commander Blazer's voice cut through the tension as his quantum projection appeared in the arena. "Explain this, Admiral Zenthor. How has a human child made a mockery of our finest warriors?" Maya turned to face the projection, her posture showing neither fear nor arrogance. "Your warriors are strong, Supreme Commander, but strength isn't everything. You saw us as weak because we let our children be children. But you forgot something important children learn. We adapt. We see things differently." Blazer's projection loomed over her. "And what exactly have Earth's children learned about us?" "That your empire's greatest weakness is your certainty in your own superiority. You were so convinced of our weakness that you broadcast your tactical frequencies openly. Your warriors discussed classified protocols in front of us because they thought we couldn't understand. Every time you laughed at us, you revealed something new." The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected sound. Commander Thrax's laughter. Not the mocking laughter of before, but something new, tinged with genuine respect and perhaps a hint of embarrassment. Supreme Commander Thrax said, straightening despite his damaged armor, "I recommend we honor the terms of combat. Not just for New York City, but for all of Earth." Blazer's projection flickered with surprise. "You suggest we abandon the conquest entirely?" "I suggest we recognize that we have grossly underestimated this species. If their children can learn our weaknesses so thoroughly in mere weeks, imagine what they might achieve as allies rather than conquered subjects." Maya finally fully sheathed her blade. "We don't want to be your enemies. We never did. But we will never be your slaves." The Supreme Commander's projection was silent for a long moment, studying the small human who had shaken the foundations of the Empire's beliefs. Finally, he spoke. "Perhaps it is time for the Drachnid Empire to learn some new lessons of its own. Fleet Admiral Zenthor, prepare for withdrawal. Commander Thrax, you will remain as our first diplomatic envoy to Earth." As the withdrawal orders spread through the fleet, Maya turned to leave the arena. Commander Thrax called after her, "Where are you going, young warrior?" She paused at the doorway, that same knowing smile playing across her face. "Back to school, Commander. I have a history test tomorrow, and now I have a new story to add to it. The day when being underestimated became the greatest advantage of all." The Drachnid Empire had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they had received a humbling lesson from the most unexpected of teachers. As Maya Rodriguez walked away from the combat arena, she carried with her not just victory for her people, but also the beginning of a profound change in how the galaxy's most powerful empire viewed the nature of strength itself.